The young woman who had spoken up earlier hesitated near the edge of the crowd, unsure whether she should stay or quietly slip away. But before she could decide, the bride called out to her. "Hey," she said warmly, walking over. "Thank you for your courage. You didn't owe me anything, but you showed up anyway." "I just didn't want you to go through what I did," the woman admitted quietly. "I'm sorry if I ruined things." "You didn't ruin anything," the bride assured her. "You helped me end something that should have never started." The two women shared a moment of mutual understanding, their connection born out of shared strength rather than pain. For them, this wasn't the end. It was the beginning of something better. As the guests began to disperse, conversations shifted from shock to admiration. People were already recounting the dramatic turn of events, their words laced with respect for the bride's bravery. What had started as a scandalous scene had transformed into an inspiring tale of self-respect and empowerment. By the time the bride reached the exit, laughter echoed through the venue, breaking the tension that had gripped everyone earlier. "I guess I've got a party to attend, even if it's not a wedding," she said with a playful grin to her friends. The crowd began to cheer, their voices full of support and celebration. It was clear that the bride's bold decision had sparked a sense of liberation, not just for herself, but for everyone watching. In the end, the day wasn't remembered for what went wrong, but for what went right. A story of courage, truth, and the undeniable power of standing up for yourself. And as the bride walked away with her head held high, she carried the lesson that life, just like love, is best when lived on your own terms. Donald Trump's recent visit to a Navy hospital turned out to be one of the most unexpected and emotional moments in recent memory. What started as a routine appearance quickly became a story that left everyone stunned. From doctors and nurses to the patients themselves, something about his presence changed the atmosphere entirely. This wasn't just about politics or public appearances. What happened next revealed the raw, unfiltered humanity often hidden beneath headlines and speeches. The story begins as Trump steps into the sterile white hallways of the facility. The sounds of beeping monitors and the quiet hum of ventilators filled the air. Hospital staff, accustomed to high-pressure environments, paused for a moment as the former president made his way through the ward. He was greeted with polite smiles and cautious glances, but no one expected what would unfold. Among the rows of beds lined up in the intensive care unit were servicemen and women, wounded heroes who had served the nation with pride. Their faces bore the scars of battle, their bodies marked by the consequences of war. These were individuals who had faced unimaginable challenges, and yet they carried themselves with quiet dignity. For many, this hospital was a place of healing, but also a reminder of sacrifices made. As Trump walked down the ward, pausing occasionally to shake hands and exchange a few words, something remarkable happened. It wasn't planned, it wasn't scripted. But in that brief moment, something shifted. A patient, barely able to speak, mustered enough strength to salute from his hospital bed. There was a beat of silence, and then, as if by instinct, Trump returned the salute with a solemn nod. The room, filled with the weight of unspoken emotions, seemed to freeze. You could see it on the faces of those present, medical staff wiping away tears, visitors standing quietly as they processed what they'd just witnessed. For all the public perceptions surrounding Donald Trump, this raw, deeply human encounter left an undeniable mark. But that wasn't all. What followed next would leave everyone speechless, changing the mood of the visit entirely and cementing this moment as a story no one would forget. So stay tuned, because this emotional journey is just getting started. The moment between Donald Trump and the saluting patient lingered in the minds of everyone there. You could feel the weight of respect, pain, and resilience hanging thick in the air. It wasn't just a routine hospital visit anymore. It was something far more personal. The patient's frail hand trembled as it fell back to his side, and Trump leaned closer, quietly exchanging words that only the two of them could hear. Whatever was said in that private moment brought a noticeable change to the soldier's weary expression, as if a burden had been lifted, even if just for a moment. As Trump continued down the ward, it became clear that many of these patients had stories that stretched far beyond their beds. Some were veterans from conflicts overseas, others injured in the line of duty right here at home. The nurses whispered among themselves, sharing the backgrounds of these brave individuals who had endured unimaginable struggles, yet rarely sought recognition. Each face held a story, a chapter written in courage and sacrifice. Trump's demeanor was different than what many expected. Instead of rushing through for a photo op, he took his time, asking questions and listening carefully to the answers. There were moments of humor when patients cracked light-hearted jokes about hospital food or their recovery struggles. Laughter, though faint, broke through the somber atmosphere like a breath of fresh air. But not all encounters were lighthearted. Near the back of the ward, a young woman sat beside a bed, her face pale with exhaustion. Her father, a retired Navy officer, lay unconscious, hooked up to multiple machines that monitored his fragile condition. She clutched his hand tightly, as though willing him to wake up. Trump approached quietly, offering a few words of comfort. The woman looked up, her eyes filled with a mix of hope and uncertainty. "I just want him to hear my voice again," she whispered. It was a sentiment that echoed throughout the room. Many of the patients weren't just fighting battles within their own bodies. They were fighting for moments with their families, fighting to reclaim lives that had been put on hold or shattered altogether. The visit seemed to remind everyone, no matter their political views, of the shared humanity that connects us all. But there was still a lingering question in the air, an unspoken tension that no one could quite put into words. Something about the day felt different, as though it wasn't just about this visit, but something larger, something unexpected that had yet to unfold. What would happen next was still a mystery, but everyone in that hospital could sense that they were witnessing a moment that would be remembered long after the day was done. As Trump continued his visit, the air remained heavy with unspoken emotions. Each patient had their own silent battles, their faces etched with stories that words often failed to capture. Hospital staff moved efficiently through the ward, their calm professionalism masking the emotional toll of caring for these wounded heroes day after day. Even they couldn't ignore the unusual energy in the room. One of the nurses, a middle-aged woman named Linda with decades of experience, observed the scene quietly from a distance. She had seen plenty of high-profile visits before, but this one felt different. There was a vulnerability in the way people opened up, sharing pieces of themselves they rarely revealed. Linda couldn't shake the feeling that something important was unfolding, though she didn't quite know what. Meanwhile, across the room, an older veteran named Frank struggled to sit upright in his bed. His body bore the marks of a war long past, yet the pain still lingered like a shadow that refused to fade. When Trump approached, Frank's expression hardened for a moment, skepticism flickering in his eyes. But instead of brushing past, Trump pulled up a chair and sat beside him. "You don't have to be here," Frank muttered gruffly, his voice strained. "I wanted to be," Trump responded simply, his tone unexpectedly sincere. The two men sat in silence for a moment, the weight of shared experiences, though vastly different, hanging between them. Frank eventually softened, his shoulders relaxing just a bit. He spoke about his time in the service, about the friends he lost, and the battles he fought long after the war had ended. Nearby, a young medic named Javier watched the interaction closely. He had been in the hospital for months, recovering from injuries sustained during a rescue mission gone wrong. Javier had always prided himself on being strong, unshakable. But seeing someone like Frank finally open up hit him harder than he expected. It reminded him of his own unresolved fears, the nightmares that still haunted his nights, and the guilt he carried for the ones he couldn't save. As Trump made his way toward the exit, whispers filled the room. Patients and staff alike seemed to sense that this visit had sparked something deeper, something that went beyond political divides or media narratives. The conversations that had been ignited, the moments of connection and reflection, would linger long after Trump had left. Yet beneath all the warmth and unexpected humanity, there was an unsettling undercurrent, a feeling that not everything had been said, that something crucial still hung in the balance. People exchanged glances, as if waiting for the next chapter of the story to unfold. Whatever was coming next, they knew it would be unforgettable. As Trump reached the final stretch of the ward, the mood had shifted to something almost palpable, a mixture of hope, tension, and anticipation. The quiet hum of medical monitors was now punctuated by hushed conversations and faint murmurs as patients and staff processed the unexpected impact of the visit. Even those who had remained skeptical at the start seemed unable to deny that something meaningful was unfolding. At the far end of the ward, a gathering had formed around one particular bed. The young woman who had earlier sat beside her unconscious father was now standing, her expression torn between desperation and determination. A doctor had joined her, speaking in low, measured tones, his face unreadable. The air felt thick with uncertainty. Trump slowed his pace, visibly taking in the scene as he approached. The man in the bed was Commander David Harris, a decorated Navy officer known for his fearless leadership and unwavering loyalty to his team. He had been in a coma for weeks following a critical health complication, and though the staff had done everything they could, the odds of recovery looked grim. His daughter, Emily, had refused to leave his side, clinging to the belief that he could still hear her, still feel her presence. As Trump drew closer, Emily's voice broke through the hushed atmosphere. "Please," he said softly, almost as if speaking directly to her father. "You have to come back. We need you." A heavy silence fell over the room. Even the medical staff seemed unsure of what to say or do next. It was the kind of moment where time itself seemed to pause, waiting for something, anything, to break the stillness. Trump, who had kept a respectful distance, now stepped forward. His usual confident demeanor was tempered by something quieter, more reflective. He placed a hand gently on Emily's shoulder, a simple gesture that spoke volumes without needing words. "He's a fighter," Trump said quietly. "If anyone can beat this, it's him." Emily's eyes glistened with tears, but she nodded, holding on to whatever hope she could find. The room remained frozen in suspense, the weight of collective anticipation pressing down on everyone present. Even Frank, the grizzled veteran who had seemed immune to emotion earlier, watched intently from across the ward, his jaw clenched. It felt as though the entire hospital was holding its breath, waiting for a sign, a miracle, or perhaps just a small shift that would change everything. And then, just when it seemed like the tension couldn't stretch any further, a faint but undeniable sound cut through the silence. The faintest rustle of movement from Commander Harris' bed. Everyone froze, eyes wide with disbelief and hope. Had they imagined it, or was something truly happening? The story was teetering on the edge of an incredible moment, and no one in that room could look away. The room went completely still, everyone straining to see if what they just witnessed was real. Emily's breath caught in her throat as she leaned closer to her father's bedside, her fingers trembling as they brushed against his hand. The faintest movement, barely noticeable, had broken the oppressive stillness, and now a flicker of hope danced wildly in the air. Commander Harris, who had been unresponsive for weeks, seemed to be stirring. Doctors and nurses rushed in, their professional calm barely masking the sudden urgency that gripped the ward. One nurse adjusted the monitors while another carefully checked his vitals. The beeping rhythm of the machine shifted, each sound now carrying a hint of possibility. Emily clung to that fragile moment, whispering softly through tears, "Dad, if you can hear me, just keep fighting." But just as hope began to swell, something unexpected happened that no one saw coming. One of the heart monitors emitted a sharp, erratic beep, an unmistakable warning. The doctor's calm demeanor cracked for a split second before he barked orders to the team. The tension that had momentarily given way to hope snapped back with brutal force. Emily gasped, stepping back as the medical staff surrounded the bed. Trump, still standing nearby, didn't move but watched with a tense expression, his usual confidence replaced by silent concern. The air grew thick with panic as the team worked furiously, their movements precise but urgent. Every second stretched painfully long, and the possibility of losing Commander Harris, right after a glimpse of recovery, hung heavy over everyone. Across the ward, Frank, the seasoned veteran, shifted uneasily in his bed. His sharp eyes flicked between the chaotic scene and Trump, who remained rooted in place. "That man's not going down without a fight," Frank muttered under his breath, his voice rough but resolute. His words, though quiet, seemed to cut through the tension, a reminder that sometimes sheer willpower could defy even the darkest odds. And then came the second twist, an alarm from another patient's bed, just a few feet away from Commander Harris. Javier, the young medic recovering from his own injuries, had suddenly gone pale, his breathing irregular. The monitors around him blared warnings as a nurse shouted for assistance. The ward was now a whirlwind of controlled chaos. Two patients, both fighters, both clinging to life, were on the brink at the same time. The staff divided their attention, working frantically to stabilize both beds. The stakes had never been higher. Emily's tear-streaked face turned toward her father, refusing to give up hope despite the chaos unfolding around her. Trump took a step back, the weight of the moment pressing down on everyone. No one knew what would happen next, but one thing was clear. This story was far from over, and whatever came next would change everything. The room was a blur of movement and sound, a battleground where the fight for life raged on. The beeping monitors and frantic voices of the medical staff filled the air, each second stretching longer than the last. Emily stood frozen, torn between hope and fear, her eyes darting between her father's still form and the chaos unfolding around Javier's bed. Suddenly, the relentless alarm at Commander Harris' bedside stopped. Silence fell over the ward like a heavy blanket. For one agonizing moment, time seemed to stand still. The doctor straightened, his expression unreadable as he carefully studied the monitor. Emily's breath hitched, her heart racing as she searched his face for a sign, any sign that it wasn't over. Then it happened. Commander Harris' chest rose in a slow, steady breath. The monitor beeped, now with a calm, reassuring rhythm. The team around him exhaled collectively, relief washing over their tense faces. Emily let out a sob, her knees threatening to give way as hope finally blossomed into reality. "Dad," she whispered, gripping his hand tightly. Though still weak, there was no mistaking it. He was coming back. On the other side of the ward, Javier's crisis reached its own turning point. A nurse announced that his vitals were stabilizing, and the color began to return to his face. His breathing evened out, no longer labored. The staff worked quickly but confidently, their expertise bringing the young medic back from the brink. As the tension ebbed, a strange quiet settled over the room. Patients who had watched the drama unfold whispered among themselves, sharing glances filled with relief and disbelief. Even Frank, the hardened veteran, allowed a rare smile to tug at the corner of his mouth. Told you, he muttered softly to no one in particular. They're fighters. Trump, who had remained a steady presence throughout the chaos, took a step forward, nodding slightly toward Emily and then Javier's team. His expression was a mix of respect and quiet reflection. He had witnessed countless high-stakes moments in his life, but this one was different, raw, human, and undeniably real. Just as it seemed the story was reaching its resolution, a final twist unfolded. Commander Harris' eyes fluttered open, his gaze hazy but unmistakably aware. Emily gasped, her hand flying to her mouth as tears streamed down her face. "Dad," she cried joyfully. But Harris' first words weren't what anyone expected. His voice, though faint, carried a surprising clarity. "What's with all the fuss?" he managed with a crooked smile. Laughter rippled through the room, breaking the tension completely. Even the doctors chuckled, shaking their heads in disbelief. It was a moment no one would forget. A story of resilience, connection, and the power of holding on to hope, even when the odds seemed impossible. As Emily leaned down to hug her father, Trump quietly made his way toward the exit, his presence understated yet undeniably felt. The visit had left a mark on everyone, a reminder that sometimes the most unexpected moments carry the greatest meaning. The tension that had gripped the ward finally gave way to a sense of calm, like the first rays of light breaking through after a long storm. Emily sat by her father's side, her heart full of gratitude as he rested peacefully, his breathing strong and steady. The doctors confirmed what she already knew deep inside. Commander Harris was going to be okay. His road to recovery wouldn't be easy, but the worst was behind them. Across the room, Javier's bed was surrounded by relieved nurses and fellow patients who had been cheering him on in spirit. He gave a faint thumbs up, prompting a wave of smiles from the ward. Even Frank, ever the stoic veteran, raised an approving hand. The hospital staff had pulled off something incredible, and everyone present had witnessed a story that would be talked about for years to come. Emily wiped away her tears, the weight of worry lifting from her shoulders. "Thank you," she whispered to the nurse beside her, "for never giving up." The nurse smiled warmly. "It wasn't just us. Your father's strength and yours made all the difference." Trump, who had quietly observed the emotional aftermath, made his way toward the door. His presence had been unexpected, but in its own way, meaningful. As he passed by Frank's bed, the old sailor called out gruffly, "Hey, next time you visit, bring better coffee." A ripple of laughter followed, lightening the mood. Trump chuckled, nodding in mock agreement. "Noted," he said with a rare smile. "Take care of yourself, sailor." It was a small moment, but it encapsulated the strange yet heartfelt connection that had formed in the room, a shared experience that transcended titles and ranks. As Trump exited, Emily watched him go with a thoughtful expression. Despite the chaos and fear of the day, there was a strange beauty in how people had come together, united by hope and resilience. Her father, once thought lost, had been given a second chance. And in that hospital ward, strangers had become a makeshift family, bonded by the extraordinary events they had shared. Later that evening, as the ward quieted down and the patients rested, Emily sat by her father's side, her hand gently holding his. "You really scared me," she said softly, her voice trembling. Harris, his eyes still tired but filled with warmth, managed a weak smile. "Guess I've got a habit of keeping things interesting," he joked. Emily laughed through her tears. "Yeah, well, let's not do that again." The story had come full circle. What started as an ordinary visit had turned into a life-changing experience for everyone involved, a reminder of the resilience of the human spirit and the power of hope in the face of uncertainty. As the lights dimmed and peace returned to the ward, one thing was certain: no one would forget the day when courage, kindness, and a bit of unexpected magic had made the impossible possible.